Hi everybody, welcome back to Loving Your Student Body at Cornell, a podcast series. In this last episode, we will be going over more on the students' perspectives of body positivity, building off of the street interviews with Adele, me, and Serena. So we're gonna go around and introduce ourselves.
Melanie.
Hi, I'm Serena Zhao.
I'm Adele.
Hi, I'm Sabrina.
And I'm Annabelle.
So in this episode, we sent out a survey to some students and we'll be reading out their responses on their various perspectives on body positivity. This should be a really interesting, intriguing, and even shocking episode. So you don't want to turn this off. Tune in and let's get into it.
All right.
Let's go. So the first question we asked in our survey was if our respondents have heard about the body positivity movement and what they think of when they hear of the term body positivity. Everyone had heard of it, but had mixed feelings about it. That the movement was about self-love, being supporting, and having respect for all people regardless of weight. Students added that there is, quote, no hierarchy of body shape and size. Some see body positivity as unconditional love towards their body and others. In an extended response, a student elaborated that the movement focuses on nourishing your body and aims to discourage people from putting their body through unhealthy conditions in an attempt to achieve the ideal body image that has been pushed onto us by media, society, and more. Contrastingly, another viewed it as pseudo-activism, allowing skinny people to have an excuse to show off their beauty standard conforming body. What do you all think about this movement as a whole?
I think, with the last response in particular, I think it's very easy to see why some people are very disillusioned about the body positive movement. I think it's kind of garnered a bad reputation because there have been instances of people body checking and kind of using it as a performative kind of way of purporting to be body positive. I know there's a lot of for instance, brands out there who have been very disingenuous, talking about oh, we love and accept all bodies, but then, for example, they don't have a wide variety of foundation colors, for example. So women with darker skin can't find a shade for themselves, or you could find, oh, we love all bodies, but we're not selling above a size 12. It's just I feel it's very easy to see why some people are very disillusioned with the body positive movement. I can empathize with what that person said.
Yeah, I also think that the body positivity movement comes from a place of activism and acceptance. However, due to social media's sustained popularity and presence, I believe that the idea of body positivity does not have set standards. So many people and organizations warp the idea of body positivity into something which fits their drive and messages, as was just mentioned, which kind of makes body positivity a spectrum rather than a concrete definition. Regardless of the validity in the meaning of body positivity, the body positive movement is essential. As mentioned in a student survey response with altered wording, a main component of the body positivity movement is to accept and love your body regardless of what it looks like, specifically through healthy nourishment and good treatment towards oneself and body.
Yeah, so I definitely understand where that student is coming from and agree with both Annabelle and Sabrina's responses too. I think, it is very much a sort of spectrum of body positivity. It's not one set of I'm gonna be gonna promote XYZ supplements or, quote unquote healthy whatever
the laxative teas.
The laxative teas,
the tummy teas,
the tummy teas, exactly something like that. So definitely understand the disillusionment there, but I also think so this is something I've seen recently in the news and social media. It's something about body neutrality. So kind of it's acknowledging the disillusionment of some body positive celebrities or quote unquote social media influencers who are actually quite literally trying to capitalize off of it, and saying that, well, maybe full on
super like, oh, I totally love my body exactly the way it is not for everybody, and that's okay. Maybe just being able to live in your own body, just be neutral about it, content, just kind of living your life the way you are.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment. I think the body positive movement as a whole, it really has a positive message, but it's something different to everybody. We all have our own relationship with our body, and we don't have to have the same one as everyone. The movement can simultaneously promote healthy eating while also saying, for those with different shapes and sizes, you are beautiful the way you are. I really liked all of your guys' perspectives.
Yeah, and I think even building off of that, I think there are always, I feel like within every movement, it's going to be inevitable that there's going to be somebody out there who's going to try to capitalize off of it, be like performative and fake woke, and try to use it as a means of exploiting their followers under the guise of activism, while also at the same time perpetuating more harm than good. And I think, that's probably why some people are a little skeptical of the body positive movement. And there's people who are like, oh, it glorifies obesity, or oh, like you're bashing women who, don't get implants, or women who do get implants, or, XYZ. There's a lot of discourse around it. But I think body positivity as a whole, from where I'm looking at it, I think body positivity is about like being able to like embrace your body however you want it to be, and however it is. Like if you are the kind of person who wants to get cosmetic surgeries, for example, like I think body positivity should be saying, yeah, if that's something that you want to do, if that's something that makes you happy, absolutely go for it. Whilst on the flip side, as somebody, we also should be mindful of like, let's not push people into getting drastic surgeries and procedures, like for like implants and stuff like that. Like I remember Cardi B was talking a lot about like her regrets with respect to her body alterations, and I think it has to be like a balance.
Our next question asked how respondents think social media has affected their perception of themselves. One student said, I compare myself to other people, how much fun they're having and the things they have and the way they look as compared to myself. Another, that social media has made them less confident in themselves. Another thinks it has definitely warped their self-image. They end up portraying themselves in a way they think other people will enjoy more than a genuine image. What do you all think of this issue?
I definitely think that social media affects us a lot. As Annabelle was just saying earlier, and with this question, like when we see augmented bodies on social media, while everyone has their own autonomy to do what they want, disclose what they've had done, a lot of people who are having these surgeries, you don't know that. I mean, it's none of our place to say. And so there's a lot of these unrealistic standards that simply cannot be achieved naturally, or is at least very difficult. So I think personally, when I go on social media and I see these beautiful sculpted women, I really respect that, and I'm like I'm happy for them. But it's like this balance of trying not to then impose that binary on myself and try to be that way. I have to know that I am different, everyone is different, and that's okay.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Adele. Social media honestly affects my body image a lot. So for me, when I go on social media and I, see people with alterations and, augmentations or implants or whatever else, I'm happy that they can, do that and, help themselves achieve that like image of themselves that they want. I do respect that. But for me, there is another side of social media that is like, embrace your own body, but also like, get exercise and, transform your body and, get thinner for yourself, for your own confidence, like quote unquote, like for yourself, your own confidence. And so, for me, that's like, it's like, but why is more confidence equal thinner,
Exactly.
Yeah. So like for me, it's like, I see these fitness gurus, right? Like look at my transition from, A to B, right? And then it's like, oh, I did this for myself. I feel so much better, right? And then I'm like, but what if you don't? Like, there are people out there who did that transformation as well, but genuinely don't feel that much better about their own body image or things like that. And, when I see that on social media, I have this idea in my mind, like, I need to, like, do that, do this and that to, like, make myself, quote unquote, feel better. But, it's a complex thing. So my point is like, it's, it's always good to be wary of, like, what you see and try to not internalize it too much.
Going off of what Serena just said, I think without internalizing certain videos that you see online of transformations, like something that I personally really enjoy seeing on social media are videos and transformations of real people losing realistic amounts of weight to promote like healthy, just health in general. I find those to be more inspirational and motivational than the idea of you have to be slender to feel better about yourself or to fit to fit like a more positive mindset. I think any form of just you doing something to benefit yourself is very important, and that doesn't have to be a drastic transformation. That could just be like promoting healthy mental health as well as physical health.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think social media, going back to what like Serena and Sabrina have said, I think social media in general just creates a lot of like mixed messages. I think even with people who purport to be body positive and all about health, like Serena said, there's people who are like, oh yeah, the reason why I lost all this weight and became super thin is so that I could feel confident. And while it's a wonderful thing that somebody was able to achieve the look that they desire for their body, you have to wonder at the same time, why is it that your confidence has to be predicated on your thinness or your appearance of physical fitness? It's a double-edged sword in a way, because while you want to promote healthiness and you want to promote good habits and you want to promote, just doing things that are good for your body, at the same time, you don't want to feed into the subtle forms of fat phobia and the subtle forms of I guess microaggressions is the way to say it. Like something like, you don't want to be putting yourself in a position where you're saying the only reason why I'm confident and I'm a happy person is because I became thin. Because then that's kind of reinforcing these old messages of you have to be thin to be happy. Exactly. And I think another kind of double-edged sword, if we're going back to the whole body modification debate, is when there are people who, obviously there's people on social media who have had, work done or have had, some sort of surgical procedures, cosmetics. And I feel like there's a fierce kind of backlash on like social media of people who like demand to know what you've had done in the name of body positivity. And it's forcing people to disclose the procedures that they've had in the name of, oh, you're promoting something that's unrealistic, and forcing people, especially women, into the space that they're uncomfortable with because they're just living their lives on social media, and people are saying you have to disclose this because you have to disclose the procedures you've had done. And I think it's such a double-edged sword. I think social media is it can feed into a lot of different forms of toxicity when it comes to the topic of body positivity.
So before we move on, I want to share a few more student thoughts. One person shared that it has made them more aware of themselves. Another that it has made them more self-conscious. Another that it took them years to realize they don't need to look like Instagram models. And another student said that being exposed to social media during puberty made them want to change their body to look like what the media showed. It has helped some people's perception. One person stated that they can now see how much is fake, which has improved their self-perception.
So the next question we asked our survey participants was, how do you think social media has affected other people's perceptions of themselves? Overall, students who participated in the survey tended to lean toward the belief that the impact of social media on other people's perceptions of themselves is similar to how social media personally affects them. One respondent said that they believe social media makes people insecure. Another said that social media can be incredibly damaging to people's perceptions of themselves, especially if they already harbor insecurities. Moreover, student respondents mentioned that social media might make others more conscious of themselves, as well as instigate a need to define themselves based on the appearance and physicality of others online. Through mediums such as Photoshop, models, and insane diets, one student respondent stated that, quote unquote, social media has led to a lot of self-hatred, body dysmorphia, and eating disorders. It pushes unattainable body image goals onto people and makes them feel less worthy for not looking a certain way. How do you all feel about social media's impact on other people's perceptions of themselves?
Yeah, so I think with this topic, it gets really interesting with how we think something affects other people versus ourselves. So something I've read a lot about is the third person effect hypothesis. And this is that we view that media affects other people more than ourselves, which in reality, it's obviously similar rates. Many people try to think that, oh, this won't have any effect on me. Like, this is how other people feel. I'm perfect, which is not true at all. I mean, I think we've gone into a pretty extensive discussion on social media, so we won't expand a ton here. But I think it's interesting to hear that, some students elaborated a lot more when we thought about how it affects other people. And I think that, certain people it really does affect more than others, and that we should always be conscious of others.
Yeah, and I think maybe another reason why people might be more willing to elaborate on how they think social media affects others is just due to obviously there's the third person effect. There's people thinking that a phenomenon is going to affect other people more than them, but there's also, I think, a level of empathy that I think people tend to exercise when it comes to subjects like these. I think you're going to have your own perspective, but then when you're examining how social media could affect other people, there's so many different routes to go to. There's so many different ways that social media can affect other people, and I think it's kind of an exercise in empathy to see people be able to talk about how they think social media exists in a world where there's so many different people who could be affected by it in so many different ways.
I thought it was really interesting what you had said. I had never heard anything like that before. But I definitely do think, like what Annabelle said, where it's a test of empathy, where for yourself you might not realize it's as big a problem as it is, but you don't want other people to feel the same way, and so you tend to not over exaggerate, but you tend to pay more attention to it when it is someone else, because you care about those other people. One of the questions we asked our respondents was how has their view of their body been affected by the environment that they are in, such as Cornell, friends, work, etc. And the responses varied very much. Some people stated that their confidence in their body image has greatly improved through the help of friends and a new environment. On the other hand, some say that they have struggled with their body image more due to the fact that school can sometimes put a lot of stress on them and not allow them to prioritize other things.
What do you all think about this phenomenon?
I think, personally, I think that stepping into an environment such as Cornell, it's actually kind of allowed me to intellectualize my feelings of my perception of my own body. I don't know if that's necessarily translated to me having a better or a worse relationship with my body. I think it's more to do with understanding the social forces that underlie my feelings and why they exist, and that my experiences are not unique, but they're actually oftentimes a result of these kinds of structural issues with fat phobia and the tyranny of slenderness, as brought up by Susan Bordeaux. There's a lot that goes into the reason why people have such negative perceptions of their body image. And I think at Cornell, where there's so many body positive sort of activists who are vocal on campus, I think it's really brought a new sort of perspective to how I was able to understand, this is why I feel the way that I feel.
Yeah, for me, I think that being at Cornell has actually helped the confidence I have in my own body, just because I'm able to see such a diverse range of people, and just recognize that everybody and every body is different, and that is okay. So yeah, overall, I think Cornell has had a positive impact on body image and body positivity for myself.
Yeah, and I guess to wrap up the discussion on this question, I think it's a similar effect for me. Everybody kind of has that shock of when you come from, your hometown to college, everything is so new. And I saw a lot of people who, they have different brands of clothing that might be more or less expensive than mine, or everybody has way different styles and can really express themselves, which I think being here at Cornell has allowed me to explore my body image more. I've gotten a little bit more into like streetwear and just like experimenting with fashion in ways I didn't do in high school, because you really feel the pressure more when you see the same people every day in the same building. But I think, you make new friends at college, and they build you up, hopefully, which can really change how you view yourself.
Yeah, and like you mentioned like the fashion that you wear and that being incorporated as an element of body positivity. And I think building off of that, I actually feel like being at Cornell and being able to like express my thoughts and opinions with so many other people, I feel like it's kind of broadened my idea of like what body positivity even encompasses. Like I didn't really think of like bodily autonomy as something that like fell under the scope of body positivity. I sort of thought of body positivity as, it's just how your body looks and if you're insecure about it. But I think bodily autonomy is such an important facet of body positivity. And I think like the responses, I didn't really see a lot of people addressing it, which was a little bit disheartening. But I think it's to be expected when it's something that is left out of the conversation so much. Like when it comes to like reproductive rights, for example, nobody really thinks of, body positivity as something that, can be incorporated into that dialogue. But I really think it can. Like I think that people exercising their own bodily autonomy is a form of body positivity, and body positivity can be more than just stressing over the appearance of your body.
Our next question is, how do your identities impact how you treat your body? How do they impact how others treat your body? Much of the responses had to do with how culture, tradition, loved ones' opinions have affected our participants' upbringing and how they were taught to view and treat their bodies, whether positively or negatively, and how that has lasted into their adulthoods. So a couple of the responses are the following. Part of being half Hispanic helps because the body standards from that culture of mine are much more accepting of chubbiness and curves, makes me feel healthier about my own body. But also being half white, I feel like the body standard culture there is much more restricted and promotes unhealthy behavior, end quote. Another quote was, as a Venezuelan woman, I am often self-conscious of what my body looks like, as I believe that a big part of Venezuelan culture is based on family members and friends commenting freely on one's appearance and often consequently judging others. This certainly had a negative impact on my body image growing up, often pushing me to eat in disordered fashions and causing intense body dysmorphia, end quote. So, any thoughts?
I can definitely agree with the second quote. I know that coming from a Latinx household, your family really tends to just comment on any physical appearance that they may have, just openly and freely, because it's been so normalized. And even back then, I don't know how my parents dealt with it. It's always like, oh, it's a joke. Like, we're just kidding. It's out of love. But they don't really see how damaging it is, especially with all the other factors we have going on. And so, I just feel like as the generations keep coming, we definitely become more aware of what we're saying and how it affects the people around us.
Yeah, so going off of the first statement, actually, I can kind of relate as I come from a mixed background myself. I'm half Indian and half white, and, I can kind of see the similarities within my own family to the first quote with how one side of the family accepts differences in body image where another side doesn't. Contrastingly, though, I think it's actually the white side of my family that's more forgiving towards body image than the Asian side of my family. But thankfully, I grew up in an environment where all of my family members were supportive of me regardless. But I can totally see where the first quote is coming from.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that too. So, coming from a Chinese American household, my parents immigrated here in the 90s, and they were like almost in their 30s, so they were still very much like holding on to some traditions and ways of life from there, which is totally cool. I'm so glad I was able to experience that, part of my heritage growing up. But, in the same vein, it's like they speak very, very freely about my appearance. And, when I go to visit my extended family in China, it's even more freely expressing, about like, oh, wow, are your parents feeding you enough? You look so thin.
Yeah, and I think, like, I could definitely relate to, like, situations where, like, your appearance has been called attention to as a child and you don't necessarily get offended by it, but it's something that you kind of internalize, something that you accept to be the norm. Yeah, so it's something that, like, you don't necessarily question its validity. It's just something that, as a child, you're just internalizing because your brain is like a sponge, right? You're just kind of absorbing information and input. And I think my growing up in a family, like, I didn't have like a situation where like my two sides of the family like had very drastically different cultures. It was relatively similar, but at the same time, like, I was definitely fed a lot of messages that kind of pushed an ideal of like, oh, you have to be thin, and oh, you have to get more exercise, do more running around because you're starting to get a bit of a tummy. Like, it was little messages like that I thought I had no right to even question or be offended by because I thought this was just a norm.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of your sentiments. I mean, just like growing up in my household, things weren't as explicitly said. It was more like, oh, like, have you been eating healthy? Or just like subtle things, not as explicit as some of you guys. But I know that, it can be really challenging when you're getting these kind of messages from your parents who love you. Those different kind of things can just affect you in different ways. I really appreciate hearing all of your guys' perspectives.
Yeah, no, this was really interesting. I think, like, I'm not really exposed to, in particular, like, sentiments such as the responses that we got, like, people experiencing drastically different messages from different sides of the family, and I think it's particularly eye-opening. Okay, so the next question we asked was, what are some ways that you can maintain a positive relationship with your body? And the running theme I noticed here was self-love, which I really like to see. There's responses like loving my imperfections and trying to be confident. And then there's also responses like this one that says, I remind myself that my body is beautiful, so long as I decide that it is beautiful. I've stopped looking for outwards validation on it and making detrimental comments about it. I remind myself that my body is merely a vessel of who I am, and it is what makes me me, and thus I need to nourish it and treat it correctly. Another trend that I noticed, like, beyond this, was people trying not to compare themselves. For some, it's comparing themselves to how their body used to look before, and for others, it's staying away from social media to avoid stressors, or staying away from social media to avoid having to subconsciously compare oneself to another person. Conversely, another respondent said that they actually utilize social media to improve their relationship with their body by following more body-positive female role models, which it's very interesting because we've been talking this time about how social media is kind of this double-edged sword, and I think even the respondents kind of reflect that.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question to see how different people remain body positive. For me, I probably do the same things that these respondents listed. Try not to compare myself, avoid social media at all costs. No, just sometimes. But, I think the main thing I do is just when I look in the mirror in the morning, I just try to say, Adele, you look good today. Those little affirmations of positivity. I'd recommend that to anyone listening.
Yeah, I echo everything that Adele said and the respondent said too. I think a lot of the times when we, tell ourselves or other people, oh, be confident in your own skin, it's such an abstract idea, for me at least. It's like, how do we do that, right? So I'm really glad, Annabelle addressed some of those more like concrete ways of like staying off of social media for a little bit, or, don't extract yourself from that mindset of comparison. For me, what's really helpful is, well, the affirmations are always really good to start off the day with. But also, I think I'm a person who thinks like long term or like, I don't know, sometimes existentially a little bit. So I'm like, okay, when I'm like 100 years old, you know, when I look back on the first 100 years of my life, I'm not going to be saying like, oh, I wish I didn't eat that cake. I wish I had, you know, eaten this or that, or I wish I had exercised like 10 minutes more, an hour more, or whatever else. So I try to remind myself like, this is, you know, like how I feel about my body is, you know, important, and treating it well is really important, and not falling into that mentality of like, oh, I need to like do this like regimen exactly so I can fit this body standard and type exactly. It's important because it's like, when I'm 100, I'm not going to be thinking about that, you know?
No regrets.
Exactly, no regrets. It's like, eat that cake, you know, or don't eat that cake if you don't like cake, but, you know, just do whatever you want, basically. Do whatever makes you feel happy at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's like the difference between
Happiness.
living like to age 80 and like being strictly regimented, and maybe living to age 75 and having a lot more fun. I don't know. It's like, pick which one.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that was just said. And I think another really important thing for me to do as someone who focuses a lot on empathy is to treat yourself the way you would treat child you. Don't be mean to child you, because that's such an important stage of development. Would you tell child you that you were too fat or that you weren't pretty enough? You wouldn't. You would want to encourage a child's growth and development, hopefully.
Hopefully.
So yeah, treat yourself the way you would treat child you.
And I think another important thing is that yes, like you can love your body, and yes, you can want to change some things, and that's perfectly okay, but just don't feel the need that you have to change how you look in order to be happy, because that's not the case.
So we also asked at the end of the survey if there were any additional comments respondents would like to share. One that really stood out to the group was that body positivity is so crucial. Too many people think that they don't meet society standards. People think they are less than. But everybody deserves to feel good about their body. Another one is, nowadays there's a narrative of quote-unquote hot girls have stomach problems. And while it is a meme, it is something that should be spoken about more seriously. Many of my friends, my being the person who submitted this response, and myself included, have gastrointestinal issues that are often unexplained and confusing. After much research, I started to believe that this is due to a negative attitude associated with food and can be the repercussion of disordered eating habits.
Absolutely.
That's really key. I think definitely, kind of like, they talk about like placebo effects with things. If you're constantly telling yourself you have to be skinny, studies have found that it can actually like force your stomach to like reject food and stuff, even if you haven't developed a full eating disorder yet. So I think it's really important that, you don't want to make a meme that pretty hot girls have stomach problems. Obviously, plenty of people have stomach problems. You don't want to minimize what they're going through. I think the really key thing of this whole thing is that we all need to have empathy for one another in order to grow in our own happiness and in others' happiness, and that no matter what, like, your body is your body, and you can treat it however you want, and you can have whatever feelings you want about it. It's that autonomy we touched on.
Oh, I think the hot girls have stomach problems meme, I kind of appreciate in a way, because it's like, a little bit of taking back, because there's so many, there's a lot of stigma around like stomach issues, gastrointestinal issues. Like, it's the source of every lowbrow comedy flick you've seen ever. But I feel like, kind of making that little counter meme of hot girls have stomach issues, it's kind of taking back that sort of under discussed issue because of how stigmatized it is. But yeah, no, I think I kind of appreciate the meme, but yeah, I get what they're saying.
Yeah, that actually reminded me. I quickly wanted to throw this in. A show I watched on Netflix was called Insatiable. I don't know if any of you saw that.
I've seen that.
Yeah, so I know that a lot of people at the beginning did not like what they thought this would be about. A girl who was overweight and then got hurt, had to lock her jaw shut, and then she got skinny. But in reality, when you watch the show, her attitude is still the same from when she was a person before to now. She's actually like a kind of a bad person.
Oh, she's a terrible person.
She's a terrible. I mean, not to spoil it, but she kills someone.
She also threw a kid from a wheelchair or something like that, right?
Yeah, let's not go too into it. But I think the point is that it's like being skinny doesn't make you a good person. Like you can be a good person at any shape. You can be a bad person and overweight or not. You know, it's like you can be anything, and to not let that affect you.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to comment about that. So perfect transition, actually. Yeah, so I think, that whole stigmatization is rooted in, well, first of all, like media like that, portraying like skinny equals good, people, and, like, oh, they are very active and like they're such productive working people, right? Or, the reverse for, not thin people. So like, there's this whole, very, very like historically and socioculturally embedded just connotation of what, body types like translate into. We need to think about body types as body types. If someone's body is their body, doesn't mean anything about their character, doesn't mean anything about like, their habits or, whatever they've accomplished in life. Someone's body's just their body, and we need to have compassion for that. Self-compassion, but also compassion for others.
Period.
Yeah, I think that's a really great sentiment. Compassion above all else. Thank you guys. For those of you who made it to the end of this episode, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that this inspires you to, remain body positive. If you haven't listened to the rest of the series, I hope you do. Well, that's all, folks.
I'm Melanie.
I'm Serena.
I'm Adele.
I'm Sabrina.
And I'm Annabelle.
And this has been
Loving Your Student Body at Cornell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Woo!